Hey, this is Christina Feliciano with Feliciano and Friends. I'm here with one of my best friends, Stephanie. She's a vice president of marketing at a private equity firm, and she also has her own business and does fashion. And she's here to teach us about marketing tips for everyone, from startups to big firms. So, welcome, Stephanie.
Oh my gosh, thanks so much for having me.
All right. So, for someone that's trying to do a startup, what do you recommend for marketing that doesn't cost a lot of money?
So, there's so many things that people can do.
Okay.
And straight out of the gate, it's gonna sound slightly negative. The first thing I tell people to stay away from is don't just follow whatever the latest trend is that you see on social media. When it comes to marketing, even when you're startup, whether you're in the startup phase or the success phase, you have to utilize strategy and tactics to grow your business for the long term, not just the immediate impact. So I just tell people, don't get weeded with whatever the latest trend is. But easiest when straight out of the gate, know your audience.
Okay.
If you're talking to everybody, then you're talking to no one, because you have to know who your consumer is and what it is that they want. The second piece of advice I always tell people, know your numbers, because if you're starting a business, you could just be starting a business for fun, and I'm not knocking that.
But like this.
Right, yeah.
Fingers crossed.
And listen, we talked about it earlier, I have a little side hustle.
Yeah.
That's the fun part of what
Yes.
I do. But if you're looking to make money, it takes money to make money, but you can't spend more than you're making if you want long-term success. And a lot of people will start off spending too much money on marketing. So to kind of back that up, point 2A is really utilizing your end goal to back into how much you spend for marketing. So in my world, for budgeting, we utilize a percentage of revenue. So if my goal is to make $100,000, then I budget whatever I'm going to spend based on my goal and then space that out. So amortize that over the cost of over 12 months. If 100,000 is your goal for 12 months.
And what percentage do you recommend?
So it depends on the type of business. So this is where you kind of got to get it,
give a couple examples.
Get into the weeds. So I use a percentage of revenue and base it upon whether or not you're looking to make big growths, maintain, or even kind of downsize a little bit. As it relates to this, nobody ever wants to downsize. So if you're looking to downsize, I'm telling you to spend 4 to 6% of the revenue that you're bringing in on marketing expenses, and that's across the board. If you're looking to grow,
no, this is revenue, not profit.
This is revenue. This is revenue, not profit, because it's a part of the overhead, everything. So it's a part of your business expenses. So 4 to 6% if you're looking to just maybe downsize or not make big growth. 7 to 9% if you say, hey, I want to grow, but I don't want to grow so big that I'm going to create major growing pains for my business. And that could be growing pains, even if you're just an individual person. Sometimes if you take on, I'm sure you've experienced this, you can grow too much too fast, and then you're not providing the service that you say that you want to provide, or the level of product. You can spread yourself too thin. But if you have the foundations in place and you're ready to grow, 10 to 12% of your revenue needs to be spent on marketing. Now within that, I break it down into percentage of what gets spent on digital marketing, and that's a combination of Google, Microsoft. Think of when you just type in, if somebody's typing in your business and they're putting in keywords, there's a percentage of that 10 to 12% that's spent on digital. There's a percentage that's spent on social. There's a percentage that's spent on what I like to call traditional advertising. So
what's traditional? What's considered television, radio?
Television, radio, billboards, print advertising.
How do billboards do?
So billboards are a new trend that has resurfaced where initially it wasn't great. The reason people weren't big on billboards is because it's hard to track the return on the investment. However, a lot of traditional marketing outlets, the spend is hard to quantify. So now that's where you just take a percentage of your revenue that you're looking to make and just allocate it to that. Now, I also lump in traditional with branding. So think of it as building the foundation for your business to gain more sales and more customers in the future. So you're not always going to get a 10-to-1 on that investment.
What's your opinion? So Elena Cardone says best known beats best product. Do you agree with that?
What did she say?
Best known beats best product. So it's better to be known than have the best product. Yeah. It's for a sale. So it's more important to be visible and that you brand to people that know you versus having the best product. So that's why she's always like, her and her husband are everywhere. Yep. Super saturated, and their philosophy is that it's important to be best known. So that's why they keep on staying out there. Yeah. Do you think that's true? Like, do you think what I'm doing, like where I'm trying to be best known, is that a positive thing, or do you think it can be oversaturation and be negative?
It can be oversaturation, and people can misperceive that as a negative aspect of your business. I don't consider you to be like oversaturated or everywhere.
Like, no, you're not too much.
No, because honestly, if you were, I would tell you, we would not let this happen. However, it's about the psychology behind why people do what they do and why they invest in your product or your business. So the other thing I tell people, obviously people like to buy from people. They don't like to buy from corporations. However, even if you have the best product and the best service in the market, if you are in too many places and it looks like you're spending too much money, people have a negative perception behind that. Now, whether or not they can consciously admit that, they may not be able to, but there are focus groups and studies done.
It's interesting you say that, because I have heard, maybe from you, so sorry if you're the one that told me this, but there's been like a pretty poor return maybe on maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but on like the Jaguars, because it's really, really expensive to advertise for them. Correct. And then there's not necessarily the same return on investment. Although you would think like someone, and I've known people personally that had their faces on the stadium and their faces are no longer there because it didn't work out.
Now, I personally have never...
Love the Jaguars.
I know.
I advertise for them.
I was going to say, I have personally never been affiliated with a business who signed off on that. However,
Stephanie's like, you didn't hear that from me.
You didn't hear that from me. I love you guys. No, but realistically, I have seen the price tags, because I have been at a couple of larger companies now who spend a decent amount of money on getting that branding awareness and being in the right place at the right time. Sometimes the price tag on something like that is too large for any sort of return on that investment. The other reason that sports partnerships can sometimes backfire is because people
don't like the team.
Well, it's not even
our team.
It's not like they don't like the team. If they're not successful, people get very frustrated, so they're less likely to do business with somebody associated with a team that's not doing well because they have the negative connotation.
That's it. That makes sense.
A lot of marketing is understanding the psychology behind why people do what they do and why they make the decisions that they make.
So why do people do what they do?
So it depends on whether you're talking about if it's a service-based business, if it's a product-based business. It can be as simple as, with you, I want to look the best. I want to feel the best. I want to feel good every day in my body. And that's a legitimate reason. But there's also the people who just say, I'm gonna buy from Christina because I know that Christina is the best of any provider at what she does, and I only buy the best of the best. So that's the same equivalent of a person.
Thank you, Stephanie.
When it comes to, like, if you're buying retail, that same person is probably shopping luxury goods.
Okay.
Because they like the logo, they like the association of always having the best and having the best name in the market. So there is something to be said for somebody who has that mindset. But then there's somebody who's looking for the best value. So this is where you can fall into that potential area where people perceive that you're spending too much of their money to promote yourself. Now, I don't necessarily let that dictate what I am doing when it comes to my business. But at the same time, you know your business better than anybody else. And where sometimes startups and entrepreneurs fall into a gray area is they have trouble talking about what they do. You know, because it feels like it's self-serving and it's self-promotion, but you're going to be your biggest fan.
Exactly. Look at me.
Yeah. So you have to talk about it, but you have to talk about it in a way that people feel like they can relate to it.
And I think that's what I try to genuinely, and honestly, when I first started a couple of years ago, I had I didn't have the following I had now. And people were really making fun of me because I wasn't really, so I'm just on my own social media, just talking about my own products. But it worked out for me. And I think in part it worked out because like I had girlfriends that were like you and other that were like really like aesthetically, this doesn't look that great aesthetically, Christina, and you should be doing different things. And I'm like, well, people are what, and I think that surprisingly that was just, and again, I hope that maybe in the future everything can be aesthetically like perfect. That'd be great. But right. I think at least in my experience, just like getting the content out there and not waiting for it to be perfect has been really beneficial.
It is. That was going to be the next tip that I tell people is, and I came across this quote on LinkedIn, and I wish I could remember who it was, but I love to read little quotes. And it was from a marketing executive at another company, and it was, it has to do with managing your people, but it relates to what you're doing from a marketing standpoint. And she said, I learned to overcome my perfectionism by telling my team GE, and GE stands for good enough. Because sometimes good enough is exactly what you need in order to create that next sale, to win that next customer. And you may look at it and say, I don't like this about it, I don't like this color, I don't like this font, but the customer is not looking at it the same way. So you have to just say, okay, this is good enough, because you have to start somewhere. And that's where people fall into that marketing trap. There's so much information on the internet, which is outstanding, because 20 years ago, if you wanted to buy this whole setup, you would have had to go to some specialty store. Somebody would have had to tell you what to do. Now you can find it online. And
Amazon.
Right.
All of this is my pre-furnished condo.
Right.
It's owned by 90-year-olds. It's Golden Girls chairs.
Golden Girls are extremely popular.
And then Amazon. Yeah.
Right. So you started somewhere.
Izzy and I would so for the podcast, and it was kind of cool. So the other day when I was on River City Live, who was it? France and Eden. So Eden was super sweet, and she was like, "Congratulations on doing that." And it was like kind of cool to say congratulations, and I was like, but at the same time, I just did it. Like it wasn't like someone sponsoring this production. Like I'm producing this with Izzy. Like we are just making it. We're on Spotify, we're on YouTube. We really are doing it, but it was and I think that sometimes, and a couple people were like, "Congrats," and I'm like, I appreciate it. It's really kind, and I'm happy that they're saying congratulations, but nobody's like paying me to do this. Nobody's like behind this. It's like me,
but it
self-funding.
It ties
on
back,
a dream.
It ties back to the quote that you just mentioned, where you have to get going, but you're just driving brand awareness of your business. Because by driving brand awareness, you can drive down the cost of your other marketing expenses.
And the other thing too is it's like I recently learned it's called OPA, which is other people's audiences.
Yeah.
So you can. We'll talk about your business a little bit. Like you can get my audience and vice versa. So when you have something like a podcast, then we can learn from each other, and then it can also, from a business standpoint, be positive, and that you are getting the whoever you're interviewing, you're getting their audience, and vice versa.
Exactly, and that's where like another marketing tip that I tell people, especially when you're starting out. You just mentioned it. Other people's audiences. Find partnerships that are beneficial for both people or both businesses, because cross marketing and cross promotion is the most cost-effective, easy way to find a new prospect and a new audience. The other just completely aspect that's even you can't quantify is that finding someone else's audience can show you who your new customers might be. And
for sure.
You mentioned this, how we talked about the aesthetic side of your business.
Yes.
But then you explained to me like your clientele and what you were looking to do and some of the numbers behind the business. And I said, go run with it, because it works, and you can slowly split test and find new audiences and find a different buyer persona that you can add to supplement when that audience that is your core clientele is maybe not buying as frequently as you would like them to, or they've run out of referrals, or the well has basically run dry.
And that's one thing to kind of give a synopsis of what Stephanie's talking about, is that I do some aesthetic work with Botox fillers, but I price it pretty low to get people in the door. But really what my business is and what my passion is much more body transformation, getting your body fit, getting your mind well. So that's really what I do, but I use the aesthetics is kind of a way to get people in.
Right.
So,
and in our world,
and I love the aesthetics. I mean, I love making people beautiful, but I'm not a plastic surgeon. There's tons of really talented people in Jacksonville, and that hasn't been, I mean, I've good at it, but I'm not the best at it. So what I feel like I'm the best at is transforming bodies, and I think I'm really good at mindset things of being able to, if you feel really down and out or really low, helping people get back on top, and that's my expertise. So if you want to look pretty, I can get you pretty, but then I'm going to get you in and be like, hey, body wise, mental wise, let's try to work on that.
And that is the exact strategy that I work with my team in any business. Just because your end goal might be hey, I have this package, I would love it, and I'm just making this up because I don't know. Let's say you had your big package is $20,000, and that includes all of the things. I have the aesthetics. We're getting you fit. We're getting you nutrition, whole 9 yards. That is not going to be something that the majority of your prospects that you're marketing to are going to be able to afford.
For sure.
So you get them in the door and you show the value of who you are and what you do, and it's much easier to make that big ask once you get them in the door. People make the mistake of saying, if I just sold 5 $20,000 packages, I would be making X number of dollars. Great, but that's a much harder process. So start with the $200 package, get them in, show them the value, build that value, and now they're hooked. Now you don't have to do that larger cost of acquisition because typically a larger buy is going to be a larger expense up front to acquire that person. So you acquire them at a lower amount and continue to drive revenue long term.
So what would you recommend to somebody that's doing, like, I'm just going to kind of think of something that someone that's doing online. How about yourself? So talk about your business that you do and how you market that, because you've been really successful. Everyone knows you, and just explain that and how you've been able to get so known.
So it's actually a combination.
Because you're beautiful and everyone loves you, and you're the best fashion icon in town.
It's really my personality. It sells itself. No, obviously.
Yeah. So talk about your business. Explain what it is.
My business, I started
outside of being VP of marketing at a private equity firm.
And you know what?
This is amazing. Everything that you do.
Brief little side note. I started this business when I was full-time in the fashion industry.
Okay.
I'm no longer in that role, but that was my dream as a kid. I would read the magazines. I thought, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do all of these things. I didn't have the skills, but this is where some of the marketing and sales played in. I had another job and I was able to network. And I quickly realized that by working hard in my day-to-day job, where my boss would allow me to go to a client dinner, go to a special event in lieu of their attendance. So I started making networks and building connections and was able to transition that job into working for an actual clothing designer, which is what I always wanted to do.
Awesome.
And I had a phenomenal time. But full transparency, fashion is so much fun and you can go all over the place. They are not notorious for being the best paying industry.
Okay.
And I had the best time, but my closet can't pay my mortgage.
Right.
So I eventually decided to pivot, and that's where I started focusing on growing my business on the side because it's where I have fun. Okay. Now, I don't pay my mortgage with my side hustle.
And what's your business called?
So it's called The Borrowed Babes.
And how can they find you?
It is online. My website is theborrowedbabes.com, and then on Instagram at theborrowedbabes.
Yes.
And I talk about luxury for less. And this kind of ties into the whole marketing aspect. Yeah. I always want to do the most with the least. And that's what's made me successful as a marketer because I understand.
You're so amazing in
the revenue. You really are. I understand the revenue behind the profit and loss. Why are we doing what we're doing and where can we make those incremental gains without blowing the budget? So for me, I love fashion, but I ultimately would like to retire young as opposed to being an old lady. Yes. Not that it's just my personal preference. I'd love to retire next year. It's not feasible. But I said, okay, maybe I want the Gucci bag. Maybe I want the, YSL sunglasses. Yes. I found places where you can rent them. So I started talking about that, and it was a huge niche at the time. Partnered with a lot of the big outlets and providers who rent clothing, built up a following, and then tie that in with my actual full-time job. So now when I go to what some might deem a slightly more boring event, I'm able to talk about what I do on my day-to-day. But I read a book about networking.
What was the book?
Of course, you asked me. I want to say it was something. I want to say this was Mel Robbins. Of course, everybody talks about her now. But there was a mention in the book about when you go outside and you're networking at other events, sometimes asking people what they do for a living is a touchy subject.
Yes.
They may not want to talk about what they do for a living. They may not want to be known as their job. They might be a stay-at-home whatever, and they're self-conscious about it. So when you're making those connections to build your network, ask them what they do for fun. What is a hobby? What makes them happy? What do they enjoy? So I take that stance when I'm out networking, and I'm ultimately building my business. But those people talk about what makes them happy. So if they don't want to admit what they do for whatever reason, and that's fine. I'm not like, I'm going to tell you what I do because I'm like, buy for me, buy for me, buy for me. You get that. Right. But at the same time, I'm able to transition that, and you learn about them. Then by nature, they talk about what you do for fun. And that's when I mention my business. And then they're like, okay, great, this is wonderful. And then outside of that, obviously, it's a lot about social. I've been slacking a little.
I know since Jana left.
Shout out to Jana for helping like create content. Yeah. The combination of that and the new job just like really meant like I don't, and I dress a little bit more professionally. Before when I worked in fashion, I was able to have a little bit more.
I was surprised that you were wearing a River City the other day.
I know. I was just
they let you wear underwear on River City.
I know that when I was living on the edge when I went to work.
She had like a sheer and just her underwear on underneath. I was like, whoa, look at Stephanie.
I know, living on the edge. Side note for anyone who hasn't seen it, I had a blazer on that covered my cheeks. So
I felt like I didn't see that.
I know you. Well, that's because I was. Well, when I saw you two, I wasn't on camera. When I was on camera, it was fully covered because
That's not what I saw.
I know. I was like, I have a professional reputation to uphold, but also my parents often watch, and so do like family members of mine. They would be like, "How dare you? How dare you look like that in public?" But yeah, so that's how I just ended up transitioning it, and now I talk about people because it's something that everyone, they always want to look their best, and that's why they come to you. But then I take it to the next step after that, after they've gotten everything fit and tight and wonderful.
The clothing, I know you look amazing.
How do we throw something on? But then they save money with renting a tire. Now they can spend more money with you. Consistently looking and feeling the best.
That's awesome. So is there any advice that you have for young women that are trying to get into entrepreneurship?
Yes. My advice, and this is something I tell everybody who works on any of my teams, there's two pieces. Number one, this is a little phrase that I coined long ago. Know your goal, but slow your roll. We talked about this earlier. You can't start at the top of the ladder. Yeah. You have to build and be willing.
Say it again. So know your role.
Know your
goal. Sorry.
Know your goal, but slow your roll.
All right.
And by that I mean I meet so many young people starting out on their career or starting their business who instantly create unattainable goals for themselves. So number one, the goal is too big and it will set you up for failure because if you don't hit it in the time frame that you've created in your head, now you feel like your business is not a success. It doesn't mean that your business isn't a success. It means you may have set goals that were unattainable, so you don't know how to scale up to get there. So start with something attainable, but also know you're young and you're new and you have to learn. So don't be afraid.
How many years do you think it usually takes? I asked Anna last week when she was here, and she said it took her about 3 years.
I was going to say, especially for a service-based business where you're providing a service and not just, hey, come buy this particular item. It can take anywhere from 3 to 5 years to really find that.
Yeah, I was going to say 5 years.
Find your voice, find your customer, and generate the revenue that you're looking for. I was going to say
5 years, then 3 years, and I'm not there. So right. Like, it must be 5 years. That must be the magic number.
But there are some people who spend much longer
5 years
to get there, and it could be for a couple of reasons. It could be they spent too much early on, and now they're trying to find that balance, or they bit off more than they could chew, and so they did themselves a disservice because if you bite off more than you can chew, you spend too much money, now you've created a negative perception behind your business, and it's much harder to overcome a negative perception than it is to just slow and steady build your brand, build your voice, and create a positive experience for everyone who associates with your business.
Okay, that's good to know. And then are there any books that you recommend? Audiobooks? Or I guess any book could be an audible.
An audiobook, yeah. You know, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that. I don't read as many books as I should. I do listen to a lot of audiobooks, but full disclosure, sometimes I'm the queen of listening to the abridged versions that Spotify offers. Okay. And I read loads and loads of business and marketing newsletters. So I say I'm consistently educating myself and making myself better at what I do, but it may not necessarily be in a book. So I have 5 or 6 daily newsletters that I read, and that's a combination of just what's going on in the business world.
What are the newsletters? You know, what are many of them?
Number one for marketing is the Marketing Millennials.
Okay.
Great pieces of small to digest, easy to digest pieces of advice, and they cross so many industries. So no, you may not see something one day that applies to your business or what you're doing.
You get it sent to your email, or is it an app?
Send to your email.
All right. So the Marketing Millennials.
Marketing Millennials.
Okay.
The second one that I love to read is oh my gosh, Millionaire, Go To Millionaire. Side note, Marketing Millennials and Go To Millionaire. It's a husband and wife duo.
Okay,
they're
very
both
cool.
marketers.
Yeah.
They're both hilarious. So you learn.
So it's fun.
It's fun, but you don't realize by the time you get to the end of it.
So how do you just go to the website and then you sign up for the website, send to your email every day?
And so sign up for those. This is going to be really boring, but the other thing I read every day is the Wall Street Journal.
I was about to say, I bet it's the Wall Street Journal.
I know. But there's so much good advice in there. And you can learn other, what trends are taking place in other industries. Also, the Wall Street Journal. Or you
can have, one of your best friends read the Wall Street Journal every
That's
day.
True.
And then you can see
and
what's
then you can
going on.
Ask them.
Yes.
The other newsletter that I read, which is The Skim. So it's just...
I used to read The Skim.
Yeah, I still read that. The other ones that I read are business and local publications. So I read the Daily Record because it's in Jacksonville.
Okay.
The Jacksonville Business Journal, the Florida Times Union. So you just stay up to date with whatever's happening in your community. So you can learn about other events for you to attend, to meet other people, continue to build your brand. And then local chamber newsletters. You don't have to be affiliated with the chamber to receive their newsletters.
I was for a minute. I don't think I paid the fees.
Well,
so, I signed up for it. I don't think I continued. Is what I said. Sorry.
But just
thank
always,
you, Jacksonville Chamber,
exactly.
for the year.
They're great.
I never went to any meetings.
No, well, you should, and I tell people too. Here's the other bit.
I was working so much that first year, I couldn't make any of them.
That's true.
That's honestly what was happening. I was working so much, every meeting they had, I couldn't attend.
You couldn't go.
Because I was working so much.
So many people fall into that trap.
Yeah.
So
you should come to the Brazilian steakhouse for lunch. I was like, how?
Right, how? I don't take a lunch.
Yes.
But I do that. So that's another piece of marketing advice I tell people. If you can build a network and build relationships to grow your business, do it. But don't spend money on things like that if you're not going to be able to attend. So just be realistic. So that kind of plays back into know your goal, but slow your roll. Understand your boundaries and where you have the capability to take advantage of the money that you're spending on your marketing.
Okay, awesome. So, I was going to just share the book that I actually advise everyone to read, which I didn't want to read for the longest time because I didn't want to be manipulative, was the Dale Carnegie How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Oh,
and I never wanted to read it because I'm I have a lot of friends. I'm first of all, I don't want to read that because I don't want to try to be manipulative to meet people or to make people like me. But I ended up reading it in the last 5 years, and what my biggest takeaway from it was that human behavior, usually when people do really shitty things or things that are very harmful that we would perceive as really harmful, in their mind, they usually justify it for some reason.
Oh, for sure.
And that was a huge takeaway for me in interpersonal relationships, with clients, with friends, with family, just all around, that even when people do things that maybe really hurt me or I think is black and white, bad, unjustified, in their mind, right or wrong, they're probably justifying it. And it's helped me a lot with human relations. So that's a great book. It's just in life, the Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it's not manipulative the way that I thought it was. And there was also a pretty interesting story in there about some woman that had been bedridden because she had been catered to for all these years. And then her husband died and she got out of bed, and how often human behavior too is what people kind of around us enable. So
right.
If you don't read the Wall Street Journal, you can get on the
nerd. But the other, and what I tell people not to read though too, and this could be a controversial take, but that's over here. Let's do it. don't read too many self-help books. By that, I'm going to call her straight out because I strongly dislike her. People love Rachel Hollis. Have you ever read any of her books?
Oh, I've seen her.
Garbage, in my opinion. However, if you love her, you love her.
I felt bad after her husband died.
Well, listen, on another podcast on another day, I have so many thoughts about that, but that's neither here nor there. However, when you're trying to grow a business and you have to be good at sales and marketing, rejection is the name of the game, and some of those books innately make you feel bad if you're failing. And it just
I agree, and that's where she does some weird stuff.
Yeah, and that's
same with Leda Cardone, which I like her a lot, but I saw her yesterday something where she was like, you have to be wealthy because if you're not wealthy, plus healthy equals wealthy. So if you're not wealthy, you're not well, you're not healthy, and it's like, well, I don't know if that's quite true, right? Like not everybody has that like psychological drive that wants that, like. I think I kind of want that for me and my family, but not everybody does, and I don't think that makes you like morally healthy or well. So if anything, to the opposite for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So
it wouldn't, and it's the same thing when you talk about, we can market and do all of the things, but you have to have the right team behind you and your business, and you have a great team. But if everyone who worked with you had your if everyone who worked with you had your mindset, your business would crumble because you guys would eat each other up. So you have to have like each person that feels their role to build a solid team. So when you successfully market and you're acquiring new customers, you have people who fill these roles. Like on my team, we always look for the most talented person who's going to work hard and be successful. But I'm always transparent. I'm a lot. Like I'm a big personality. We have big ideas. We work really hard. If my entire team had 5 people built like me,
same. Exactly. And there's
it would be rough stuff.
And John Brooks and Brittany Brooks, they gave it to me as a gift, and it's I'll have to at the end, but it's not the who or not the how, but the who. Or I'll figure it out. But it's all about, and it starts off with Michael Jordan, and that basically Michael Jordan, I could be wrong, but it was like 6 or 7 years, was not the champion. And not until he had Pip and all these different teammates did he become the champion. Right. So people like give so much credit to Michael Jordan, who is absolutely amazing, but he didn't have that until he had the right team members in place. Exactly. And that is so, so vitally important. So like, I can't do this without Izzy. Truly. Right. I mean, there's no way that Alpha or the podcast, if I didn't have Izzy, it wouldn't be here. So I need, this team. My business partner, our medical director. I mean, there's people that I need. Right. Our accountant, our secretary. There's just a lot. Like, it's not just me. And if I did not have that team, I would not be nearly as strong. Right. And there's a lot of people behind the scenes. Yeah. And our nurse practitioner, everybody behind the scenes, front desk, all of them are really, really important.
And it all ties into the psychology of people and how they do what they do and why they do it, because that's how all the personalities mesh well together and build a business. Yeah. So outside of just marketing effectively and knowing your business, understanding people is integral to the success of your business. When you have a business that relies on people giving you money. I mean, I don't know what sort of businesses rely on other people to give them money. I don't really know. That's concept. But at the same time,
even nonprofits, they really rely on it.
They do rely. But at the end of the day, building the right team to support all of that is crucial to the success of your business.
All right, and then the final question to end it: is there any like quote that you would like to share? Actually, and that's 2 questions. What's a quote, and what's your 5-year vision? And then we'll wrap it up.
My quote I already I mentioned that it's the one thing because it's my little quote, and I just remind people to know your goal, but slow your goal. You can't start at the top and then stay at the top. You gotta work hard to get there. But my 5-year goal or plan, I think I have a better answer for this.
You should manifest things.
I try to manifest things, but ultimately. This sounds so cheesy, but I feel like you could relate and understand. I'm just trying to make as much money as I can so that I can retire early. I know that sounds crazy, but you know what? Here's a better.
I care about people's money.
I know. Well, I mean that you could relate to it because you work hard to grow your business. Yes. Not that she's greedy, everybody. We just talk about growing business because we always talk about business.
No, for sure. No, 100%. No. I can definitely relate in that. I mean, what I'm trying to do is help people, but it's a goal of financial freedom for my family.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, yes. And then if it's related to like a fun goal, but also ties into business, you know, I saw you the other day. I was on River City Live with you. I got connected with Jana and have done some other segments on local shows. But low-key, I have always wanted to be on Good Morning America.
That's gonna happen in the next 5 years.
I was like, if I could just like pitch a segment and land on Good Morning America.
I'm sure you can make that happen.
I always say that I can, and I just haven't like forth the right.
We're gonna do that.
We're gonna do.
Look,
that.
I want like now. Look at me.
No, I know.
Piggybacking. So we're gonna do it.
You'll come with me.
I know. So, we're gonna be in Good Morning in America in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Watch us. So,
but
I might be behind the scenes, but I will be there with Stephanie.
Yeah, I think the only person I've verbalized that to is Jana because she could relate. She loves the Today Show though, so shout out to both morning shows. But I'm a GMA person. She grew up a Today person. So.
So no, it's gonna happen. I feel it, and I think that Jana for sure could be on Today's Show.
I know that's what I just keep low key.
I want to be on Rogan. That would be a goal for me.
That's true.
Yeah,
he's great. But I just keep helping to like boost Jana because I think if you just land on the show as a host, then you can bring us both with you. And
right.
That's an attainable
for sure.
Goal.
That would be honestly, Jana's so amazing. She could definitely be a host of Today.
Exactly.
And then look at us.
I'm like, listen.
Hey.
Yeah, she's like. So you guys are gonna ride my coattails? 100%.
1,000%,
Jana. That's why we comment on everything.
Yeah, we love the angels.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Stephanie. You're such a blessing. Thank you for being such a good friend and supporting
me. Thank you for having me.
Personally, a lot, and professionally. I love you and thank you.
Thank you.